two, one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but today we are continuing our themed month of non-superhero. Well, help me out with this, fellas. What is it again?
non-superhero comic book adaptations, specifically Western comics. So no manga or anything; those will be their own category.
Wow!
This is non-Western, non-superhero Western comics. And this film that we're talking about today. Well, this film that we're talking about today is actually kind of predates the comic book in the way that we think of it today. The comic books did exist at the time, but they were essentially reprints of newspaper strips. And this was a newspaper strip, and it is the 1990 film Dick Tracy.
So take it away, Forrest. Tell us a little bit about this movie.
Okay, so Dick Tracy. Well, for a bit of first of all, just going to go quick background. So last year was this movie's 30th anniversary. This year, 2021, it marks and 2021 marks the 90th anniversary, the 90 years since the character first debuted. I think it was in the Detroit Free Press.
Tribune Media Services.
The Detroit Mirror. He premiered the Detroit Mirror 90 years ago this year. But so I'm going to pull up IMDb here. Okay, so the synopsis is the comic strip detective finds his life vastly complicated when breathless Mahoney, played by Madonna, makes advances towards him. Actually, I should Tracy, played by Warren Beatty, while he's trying to battle Al Pacino's big boy Caprice, who has united the city's mob. All right, so I guess I will go also. So since Jake, you also went counterclockwise, I will also go counterclockwise here. Brandon, is this your first time seeing Dick? Is this your first time seeing Dick Tracy?
No. I saw it not too long after it came out in theaters, and I was familiar with the comics. I really liked all the cool characters like Screwhead and all that. I thought that all of the crazy looking gangsters always appealed to me. I liked that he had the yellow trench coat, the kind of cartoony, that artistic bent that they had. A lot of the comic book art. Paintings and stuff like that they put up in places. That's what it always felt like to me. And the movie was something I was looking forward to when I heard about it as a kid. It was like 30 years ago, so I think it was like 11 or 12 when it came out. And I thought it was so cool with the technology, with the with these watches that you could communicate like you were like on your phone, like a radio watch.
And look where we are now.
Yeah, but I remember the first time watching it, I was a little disappointed because they killed off all the craziest looking ones at the beginning. But but now I'm looking at it and it's like, okay, maybe not the craziest looking ones when I think of the makeup on Big Boy. But
I don't know. I mean, Littleface was pretty crazy. I mean, out of all the original one, the first few that get killed, Littleface was pretty. I remember Littleface the Brow caught my attention.
Yeah.
But that was the movie that got me super interested in Warren Beatty, and I watched that other one that he had with the cows and other things. It was just in general fun. I really enjoyed it, and as when I watched it again in high school and then in college, I started to get more appreciation for the soundtrack. I had the Madonna album that had the soundtrack on it, and got to listen to Jake complain about it. And and he'll probably say why on his, but and then of course watching it now, it was still an enjoyable ride. I'm glad I had picked this up a while back, and I'm glad that this gave me the excuse to crack open my copy and watch this delightful film again.
Okay, Jake, is this your first time watching Dick Tracy?
First, I love that concept that Brandon brought up of, which Warren Beatty movie? Oh, that one with the cows.
Next, he'll say his favorite John Malkovich movie is the one where he plays the drug thief.
Yes, exactly. But no, this is absolutely not the first time I saw this. In fact, Dick Tracy holds an absolutely seminal place in my movie history. This is probably the fourth movie, I may be forgetting, but probably the fourth movie I saw in theaters, but it was the first live action movie I saw in theaters. I know I went to see Transformers the movie, and I think that was the first one. I know I saw The Land Before Time and All Dogs Go to Heaven. This, I think, was the fourth one I ever saw in it, the first live action movie. So it's absolutely a place of history for me. I was not familiar with the comics, and as I said in our preview for Road to Perdition, I was only vaguely really thinking of this as a comic movie. But I was very familiar with one aspect of comic movies at the time. Disney really wanted this to be their Batman.
Yes.
And they were all about the merchandising. And one thing I specifically remember is at the time I was a kid and I didn't know better. I would eat at McDonald's, and I remember that game they had at McDonald's for the Dick Tracy game. And I remember that. And I remember, actually, Brandon brings up a good point. The first time I saw it, I was surprised that some of those characters were killed off in the opening scene. And I was like, well, I thought they were important to but on the other hand, there was a major spoiler in the film that apparently was spoiled by the toys, and they apparently recalled the blank toy because of that. And there were a few other things, but I have always liked the movie a lot, and I think why I liked it has changed over the years. When I was a kid, I loved the bright colors. I loved the action. I loved the over-the-top appearance of some of the villains, the over-top performances by some of the villains. Like when I was a kid, I think Itchy and I wanted to say Itchy and Scratchy, Itchy and Flat Top were probably two of the ones that I remembered a lot. You know, I always remember that line, 30 seconds, no more dick, 30 seconds.
No more dick. Now as an adult.
Yeah, but there were a few parts that I really loved from the start. I always liked Charlie Korsmo as the kid. Yep. Of course, he would go on to be in Hook and a couple other movies at that time. What About Bob? Exactly. Between those, and then there's a lot. But over the years, the main thing that has really stuck out to me that has come back around, the film. I don't think it's nearly as deep as Road to Perdition. I think there's a lot of superficiality. This time around, I felt like almost underwhelmed by it this time around.
It's a very basic cops and robbers plot.
Right. It is a basic plot.
Explicitly so.
And it's overstuffed. Like one of the big complaints people have about comic book movies is too many characters. In this one, they stuffed so many characters in.
Yeah.
But I feel like not knowing the characters ahead of time, I wasn't as let down by that as someone maybe who had been following the comics for a while. But there are two things that still stand out to me. And just like Road to Perdition, the production design in this film is phenomenal. They put so much, it's a totally different look. The other one was so desaturated, so little color. This one is all bright primary colors, and it's like one shade of red, one shade of yellow, it's very, 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 very comic booky in its visual aspect. And the music rocks. I love this music. I love the score. I love the songs by Stephen Sondheim. I think they gave the Oscar to the wrong song. Back in Business was always my favorite one.
Yeah.
But I think what Brandon may have touched on that I complained about was I thought I was buying the soundtrack and I bought the Madonna album instead. There's actually 3 soundtracks. There's the score, the Madonna I'm Breathless album, and the official soundtrack.
The various
and
artists album.
And I think Madonna re-recorded all her songs for her album, so it's not like the original versions either, which I found that disappointing as well. But it's still, anytime you got Stephen Sondheim and Danny Elfman attached, the music's going to be pretty, and Madonna, the music's going to at least be interesting, and it did turn out to be quite good. So this film is definitely a nostalgia film for me. I make no bones about it, but it does have that.
Okay, over to you, Dave. Is this your first time watching Dick Tracy?
It is.
Really?
Well, see, I'm coming at it from a different angle. I was very much versed in the Dick Tracy serial, which was back in 1937, which they made a feature adaptation in 1937 with Ralph Byrd, who basically played him. He did not wear a yellow coat. It was more of like a white coat. And the thing about Dick Tracy all throughout is I do like the fact that all of the gangsters had different like nicknames for them, and that's one thing that you'll see throughout mob history. There was always a cool ass nickname for the baddest of bosses and the baddest of underbosses and shit like that. They all had something that they were known by underground, and that's one of the things about culture that some people don't understand. And there were like 3 films before this film, and I was so versed.
Yeah, and also a cartoon series. Actually, a TV series and a cartoon series.
There are like 4 films before this one. There was Dick Tracy. There was in 1937, which was basically just the 15 episodal thing for 1937, just condensed. And then the 1945 film starring Morgan Conway, and Dick Tracy versus Cue Ball in 1946, starring Morgan Conway, and then of course Ralph Byrd reprised him in Dick Tracy's Dilemma.
Which I had on
VHS. And then Dick Tracy Meets Gruesome, which also starred Ralph Byrd, which he was the original dude to star him first. So this adaptation, I knew that it came out. I even followed some of the toy line when it did, but I never got to see it. And bits and pieces of it would come on to TNT, and I just would never catch it fully and full on. And I did pick up a copy of the film, but I would never sit down and watch it. Now, sitting down and watching it, I do see that it is like a precursor to Batman, because you got
it came out after Batman.
After Batman.
Well, it came out after Batman. Okay, well, it was very much in.
The character debuted several years before Batman debuted in the comics.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you can definitely feel a Batman-y-ish like character in Dick Tracy. I'm also getting color-wise a kind of a Mask-like world, like Jim Carrey's The Mask, with colors and schemes of that nature. So that aspect of it I liked. And but as far as the gangsters, the makeup to me is I mean, I know it's what makes the characters different in this kind of modern world. I can see how people would like these gangsters because they are different in their makeup and their structure and the way that that each one of them has a different, feel and look, and how they are henchmen to their boss, and just Al Pacino's character is just so insane. He was a madcap, kind of. I mean, he wasn't quite as crazy as his Scarface role, but you could definitely tell it was Al Pacino underneath that underneath that can opener like chin. But I enjoyed it for the most part, but I tend to like the more classical noir aspect of Dick Tracy, and though I understand Warren Beatty made a lot of like headway in like as far as makeup and effects and shit like that, and strides that maybe fell short at the time, because I think this was another bomb at the time.
To be honest, it actually did pretty well at the box office, but it didn't do Batman numbers for Disney to greenlight a sequel.
Yeah,
and it didn't.
Had a lot of legal problems too, as far as
given what Disney paid on the merchandising, they did lose money, at least initially, and they considered it a bomb, because in Disney speak, if you don't make $100 million more than what you paid on the merchandising, it's a bomb.
Not only that, but Warren Beatty apparently, as a director, would always go over budget, which that's never a good sign. That, and also like Reds went over budget.
Well, and actually,
this movie went over budget. That's generally, if you're a director, you want to stay on budget, or if anything, if you can, go under budget, because the studios will like you a lot more if you do. Just like
I do want to throw out, since it's still kind of fresh in the mind, and I just thought this was a pretty intriguing bit of trivia. We were talking about this one relative to Batman. This came out the year after Tim Burton's Batman and was heavily inspired by it in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
there was a Dick Tracy TV pilot set to come out in '67, inspired by the success of Adam West's Batman '66, but it was never picked. But it was never picked up. They did a pilot, but they never turned it to series. And so it's kind of funny that both the series tried to piggyback and then ended up doing it with the movie, whereas Bob Kane has cited Dick Tracy as one of the big influences on creating Batman in the first place. Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting circularity there.
A lot of shared history there, and not to mention, so the Tim Burton's Batman toys were one of the big things about the merchandising, which of course that was like a carpet bomb merchandising campaign for that film that Disney then tried to emulate. Disney basically recycled the same molds, the same poses of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles figures for the Dick Tracy figures, and those things did not sell very well. I think partially because they were a little too caricatured, even though they're kind of based on caricatures. So there's that bit of synchronicity. Plus, then you think about how the blank, they had to recall those figures, but then Batman Mask of the Phantasm, those figures kind of spoiled that movie's ending also. So Warner Brothers didn't learn from the mistake of the movie that was trying to copy their earlier success. So there you go. Interesting synchronicities there.
Yeah. Okay, so Dave, anything else you wanted to add?
Well, my thing about this whole Dick Tracy is you get a sense that he's very much trying to be like a Tim Burton Batman-esque like character, especially with the set that's there. It very much emulates Gotham City. a lot of
a lot
ways.
more brightly colored, though, you have to say.
Yeah.
They did that on purpose, though, because they were trying to emulate
The comic.
yeah, well, and specifically the kind of whatever it is, the 4-color, like the color processing of those really early newspaper
1940s
yeah
time period,
30s.
And I do want to say that they did get the period of dress down as far as the way they had pinstripe suits and things of that nature.
You see that Stalin one on that image I have there, a big boy, that nice red pinstripe.
Well, and even the pinstripe suits were immaculate in color. I mean, they weren't just your straight baby blue or black and white or anything like that. These were colors of like magenta and like pink and purples and greens.
Well, yeah. Well, like I think was it Texie Garcia? I think was the female hood who has got the. Well, she was actually apparently it was Catherine O'Hara.
Yes, it was.
But yeah, she was like in shocking green. But yeah, that whole scene around the board table, they were all. It was like a rainbow of villainy there.
Yeah.
It was just great. It was like.
This definitely makes it stand out from Tim Burton's Batman, even though they were trying to emulate that film in many ways. But this film is much. It's kind of. I think it's up there with Tim Burton's Batman, but it's also up there a little bit with like Who Framed Roger Rabbit in terms of like a really distinct visual style that no other movie really looks like. No other movie looks like Dick Tracy, and I mean that in a very positive way. I think that's one of the strongest things about it is just how unique it looks. It looks like a comic strip brought to life.
It kind of reminds me of the later Batman movies from the first era. Especially Batman and Robin.
A little bit.
And a little bit of the just those neons and the coloration one.
And you know what's kind of cool is when the first serial came out, it was in 1937, and Warren Beatty was born in 1937 in Richmond, Virginia.
Yep.
To be honest.
Oh. Is he Richmond born? I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Huh. Isn't that something?
Just thought that was kind of cool that he was born in the same day that in the same year that Dick Tracy came out in at least a television-like form.
Oh wow! And just going one down on the cast, the kid Charlie Korsmo. Born in Fargo, North Dakota.
Hey, there you go. It all ties together.
Yeah, yep.
Yes. Wow. Ooh.
All right. Dane, this is your first time watching Dick Tracy.
No. I saw this film in college, another college watch. And I remembered really digging it. I thought it was, again, one of the most visually stunning films I've ever seen. Utterly unique looking. I've never seen another movie that looks like it. Takes a lot of influences from Tim Burton's Batman, from Who Framed Roger Rabbit, from film noir, from gangster films, from the original comic strip, all these different sources. Utterly unique to look at. I think it's worth seeing for that alone. Apparently, this was the last big summer movie that did not have any CGI in it at all. And man, it's so amazing what they could do with matte paintings.
One of the last ones with matte paintings, yeah.
I know, I love matte paintings to death. I thought it was utterly brilliant in the visual department. I do think it is a very superficial film, but kind of intentionally so, because I don't think there was a whole lot of depth really to be mined there. I mean, the only way you really could get more depth out of these characters would be if you did go like a full-blown like Road to Perdition style movie, which I think you could do if you chose to do it. But for this kind of thing, and especially when it was made, I don't think that they would have gone that way, and certainly not with like an all-star cast. This was like throw everything big about Hollywood in terms of star power and merchandising and music and visual effects, makeup, everything big about Hollywood. Just throw it all in one movie, and I think it mostly succeeds at what it's trying to be. I do think that because it is kind of superficial and very episodic, very serialized, obviously, because it was a serialized comic strip and radio and film serials, all that. It does, the plot feels very episodic. It doesn't really have a strong through line, but that is partially by design. But I think for what it's trying to be, I think it really succeeds. I don't necessarily think it'll be everyone's cup of tea. It just depends on how much you like the world that they created and how much you like that specific era that they're trying to bring to light, and specifically through a comic strip lens. But I think for what it is and what it's trying to be, I think it succeeds remarkably well. A couple important things I wanted to bring up. So Dick Tracy debuted, was it 1931 in
1931.
newspapers? Yep.
In the era.
And then it was Batman debuted in
1939.
So then
comics.
Yeah, and that was, again, just to reiterate, so that was not only 7 years before, but comic strips, newspaper comic strips at the time, that was kind of the end-all be-all of sequential art in the way that we think of it today. Comic books were reprints of newspaper strips, and it was only in like around mid-30s era when comics book publishers were saying that we need to get original content here, and that's where you got some of Jerry Siegel and Joel Shuster's first attempts at getting Superman going. They were not successful, and then finally they broke through in 1938, and then that's when we got the superhero formal. That's when we got that debuted in the way that we know of it today, in the format that we know of it today. But Dick Tracy came out in a time when comic strips were pretty much all that there was, and before the idea of the superhero had really been formulated. So Dick Tracy, he's a pulp hero who kind of transcended the pulp novel and of the pulp magazine into the newspaper strip. And he has a lot of elements to him that would later formulate the basis of what we now think of as the superhero. But unlike the classical superhero who is a masked vigilante, Dick Tracy is a cop. He is a man of the law. He does have a distinct outfit, and he does have some gadgetry, but mostly he's just there kind of by the seat of his own wit and his own gumption. But he does have a lot of things about him that formulate what became the superhero, not the least of which was the Rogues Gallery, because his group of villains were very distinct. They had colorful names. They looked grotesque. They were caricatures of the real life gangsters that people in the 30s, especially in Chicago, saw out and about every day. So it was basically, it was taking the real life horrors and monstrosities of the streets, putting it through this cartoony lens, and then showing this ultimate man of justice being able to come in and clean up the streets. And I think that resonated with people of the era in a way that we can't even really conceive of today, but it's important to mention that. But that's why, like, I think his he as a character is so critical to laying the groundwork for what would eventually become the superhero, but not necessarily meeting all of the criteria. But I do think this film definitely, I think it pays a wonderful homage to that era and that idea of what a hero was, like a pulp hero, what he was, and specifically just how grotesque those villains could be, and how important it was that you had a man of action come and take care of them, because the police weren't really what they are today. They weren't really the same back then, or they were trying to get a crackdown on these mob forces that were taking major cities like Chicago, controlling them totally. And, so that's why you felt such a hunger for characters like Dick Tracy or eventually Superman and Batman that could actually bring justice to these seemingly unconquerable, unkillable monsters.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, I guess and that's my turn to get my first impressions. So this is definitely not a first watch for me. I didn't get to see it when it came out. I was only like 2 years. I was only 2 years old at the time, but it was a movie that I'd watched. It was. But I remember watching it on television as a kid. Whenever it came on TV, renting it all the time, to the point where eventually I eventually got it on got the VHS tape and wore that and just watched that frequently. This is it's a childhood favorite of mine, definitely a childhood favorite. And it's something I watch at least once a year. At least once a year. I mean, I actually introduced it to my nephew a few years ago, and he fell in love with it. I'm sorry. But yeah, it's just a movie that's always stuck with me. For me, like when I was a kid, I actually had I had a kind of a holy trinity that consisted of Dick Tracy, Batman, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So all three of them movies coming out back to back to back. And they all had those and all three of them spawned those wonderful toys.
Indeed, they did.
And some
Where to get those wonderful toys?
Nintendo games, which I still have.
Which, by the way, watching it again this time, I couldn't help but hear the AVGN NES review in my head. Because he mentioned the movie quite a lot, and he was like, Dick Van Dyke is in the movie. You think that's enough dicks? Seriously, when this movie came out, I don't think I'd ever heard dick so much in my life. Everybody was running around saying, Dick Tracy, Dick Tracy, Dick this and Dick that. My father said, couldn't you just call him... My father said, couldn't you just call him Richard Tracy?
Actually, did you ever see Robot Chicken's Dick Tracy sketch?
No.
Oh, check it out. I
will. Well, what's funny? So when the Angry Video Game Nerd mentioned why couldn't you just call him Richard Tracy? I looked this up specifically for this episode because not a lot of people know this, but
Dick is a nickname for detective.
Well, that's what I mean. So Dick at the time was a slang word for policeman or detective,
right?
But I looked it up. Apparently, Dick is the character's name. That is his first name. Now, undoubtedly, because of the kind of world that this is, undoubtedly it's a play on words. So it's Dick, the name, as well as Dick, the designation of policeman or detective, in much the same way that, you got Big Boy Caprice, you got Breathless Mahoney, you got... Flat Top.
Big Boy's given name is Alphonse, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, but you know what I mean? It's like all these kind of eccentric names for these over-the-top characters. So it kind of makes sense that there would be a double meaning there. Or it could be a triple meaning if Breathless ever did manage to have her way with our dear Richard Tracy, she might find out just how much of a dick he really is. And by the way, I totally noticed Madonna's nipples are totally visible in that one gown that she wears, and I'm like, for kids.
So why do you think why do you think Disney shunted this over from Disney Pictures to Touchstone? It was probably that, probably not the violence.
There were a lot of stones that were being touched during that scene. And a lot of Tracys that were getting the dick in their name.
I feel like this episode is going to be nothing but dick jokes.
I mean, come on, they write themselves.
All right, but anyway, I was a huge Dick Tracy fanatic. Like I had I still have the video game for actually Nintendo's Game Boy and Sega Genesis. I had like t-shirts, hats, suspenders of the board game. I've got Max Allan Collins' entire run on trade paperback.
Which again, to quote the AVGN episode, guess I'm just a sucker for Dick Tracy. Sucker for Dick? That didn't sound good.
Yep, I did go with Dick Tracy for Halloween 1 year.
Which James Rolfe did too.
Yep. And then just to go one more for. I do also have I did meet William Forsyth, who played Flat Top in the movie.
Oh.
I met him at Comic-Con years ago.
Nice.
I don't know where it went, but I have an autographed photo of him as Flat Top. And I remember he wrote on the autograph. Yeah. And I remember he wrote on the autograph, "Eat lead."
Nice. Well, he also played. I had to look this up because I'm like, William Forsyth. Why do I know that name? He played the corrupt. He played the corrupt sheriff that was after the Firefly family in The Devil's Rejects.
Yes. Yep. And also
played one
Raising Arizona.
Son of a bitch. He played one sadistic son of a bitch in that movie.
And to bring it back to gangsters, he had a recurring role on Boardwalk Empire, which was a phenomenal series. Yeah. But then again, he played John Goodman's brother in Raising Arizona. That's a good quality role there.
Definitely. Like if you're going to watch it, it's for me. This movie is definitely style over substance done right.
Right.
Plot-wise, it's a basic cops and robbers movie, and also and it's a very there's definitely that noir influence, although it's kind of polished. If I want to say polished or sanitized, for young viewers.
It's more colorful than traditional noir, obviously. Now, I think it owes more to the. I'll say this: so, Road to Perdition is I think it owes itself much more to classical gangster films, and this does too. But I think that you feel the noir influences here more than you do in Road to Perdition, simply because the main character is a detective, and that's much more of a feature of noir versus the classical gangsta picture. Is
Madonna
more from the
Fatale.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, she's definitely femme fatale, no doubt.
Yeah, she puts the dick in Dick Tracy. Let's just put it that way.
Was this the movie that she got?
Well, that would have been a different movie.
No, she got a Razzie for this. That was later on.
Her acting wasn't exactly the best in it, but it was there.
I thought this was probably her best performance because it was just Madonna. It had to be Madonna.
Yeah,
she's usually awful, but she was okay in this one.
That's kind of I think her best works as an actor.
That's kind of what I was gonna get at. There was normally, and I love Madonna as a singer, as a performer, all that stuff. I think she's she totally carved her own niche and everything. Kind of broke a lot of barriers and stuff. I think as a movie actress, she did not translate to films well at all. She was actually quite horrible. But I think in this case, they did good damage control, and they basically kept her towards just do your thing, Madonna, and she definitely did. And so I do think out of a star-studded cast, holy shit, the number of stars that are in this thing is unreal.
Warren Beatty, Al Pacino, Dustin Hoffman, James
Van Dyke. Yeah, there are so many. I think she and actually heavy hitter actors. Holy shit, are these people legends in their own right? And then she's there, and you're she's definitely the weakest out of all of them. But again, they were smart to largely just keep her singing and keeping her, looking sexy and everything. And
that helps make it all the more astonishing. This was the second film role for Charlie Korsmo, and he isn't even an actor by trade. He did Dick Tracy, What About Bob, Hook, and two other movies I've never seen. Men Don't. And then he left acting for 7 years, came back for Can't Hardly Wait. And then he became a law professor and did his next movie 2 years ago.
Yeah, and he did that as a favor.
He's actually a law professor who worked in the Bush administration. He's definitely an odd person to be standing toe to toe with all these. But you have a phenomenal phenomenal cast of people. You got Seymour Cassell in there. You mentioned Catherine O'Hara, Kathy Bates. You got
Kathy Bates
Henry Silva,
early role. Matthew Patinkin,
Stella Parsons, Glenn Headley, Cole Meany. It's just Dustin Hoffman. So many people.
By the way, Kathy Bates and James Caan, both in this movie and in Misery, same year. Although they were not on screen together in this one.
Interestingly enough, Warren Beatty apparently was offered Misery at one point, and he wanted to do this instead. That would have been a different film.
I guess we should move on with the plot.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Well, the plot's really pretty simple and straightforward. It's just a big series of kind of cat and mouse games between Dick Tracy and Big Boy Caprice.
And Breathless.
You've got the overarching plot, basically Big Boy trying to bring all crime under his control, and then you got the parallel plot, a Road to Perdition parallel with the sort of father-son thing of Dick Tracy and the kid,
and then also Tracy's relationship with Tess Trueheart is on the rocks.
Yep.
Which to me actually feels somewhat out of character for the comic, because in the comic he's always pretty loyal to. He's always been loyal to her.
Well, if Madonna came up to you wearing practically nothing,
black underwear.
I know what you're thinking. You don't know whether to hit me or kiss me. I get that a lot.
He does a good job.
Well, like one of the first things
he kills everybody.
I'm probably in the minority of people who would probably take Tess Trueheart over Breathless.
Right.
Well,
but I do like
one
of
the first fun for a night or two, you know.
I do like one of the first things she says to Tracy.
A little bit, yeah.
One of the first things she says to Tracy is, "I sweat better in the dark." I'm like, holy crap, that line was in a Disney movie?
Yeah, well, that and like, if my girl don't wear mink, she wear nothing. I will look good either way. And the line that I thought, oh, this is so like inappropriate when you put in like Madonna's actual history. But like when she was like, I know what you're thinking. You don't know whether to hit me or kiss me. I get that a lot. And I'm thinking, well, if you're with Sean Penn, you get both. So, you know.
Yeah. Actually, it's more interesting, this was, considering, Disney did produce this, given that, this is their first attempt at doing a blockbuster comic book movie. And then 20 years later, they just bought out Marvel and started printing money.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. All right.
David was trying to say something.
Yeah, I forgot already.
Just think about Madonna in barely anything.
I was going to say something to the fact that I loved Big Boy's casino room. The fact that when they heard that something was going to go down, and they were able to switch everything over to being just a dining room with a DJ instead of everybody placing their bets and shit like that.
With a band.
Yep. Which, and you gotta love the we talked about some of Breathless's best lines, but then Big Boy Caprice kind of steals the whole show with just how over the top he is. And it's kind of a brilliant. The casting of Al Pacino in that role is pretty brilliant, because he, on the one end of the spectrum, he delivered one of the best acting performances for sure of his career, and probably in cinematic history, as Michael Corleone in the Godfather films. And then on the other end of the spectrum, he's just like a total caricature of the mobster in general. And again, he gives it his all. He does not half-ass it at all.
No.
And
he got nominated for this.
Yeah, exactly. He got Best Supporting Actor nomination, and he has some.
The same year as The Godfather 3. He's one of the few double nominees in Oscar history for this one and Godfather Part 3.
Best Actor and Best Supporting Actor the same year.
Yeah.
Well, and he's like, there's one Napoleon, one Washington, one me. It's like he's got so many great lines like that.
Yes, although I don't know which although I don't know where he hams it up more, here or Scarface.
I'd
I think
say
he's working. I think
Go
in
ahead.
this one, it fits perfectly the tone of the movie.
yeah.
I think he's a hair over the top in Scarface. Like he's a hair over what he needed to be for there. The two movies I can think of where he goes over the top, where it fits perfectly, are this one and The Devil's Advocate. I mean,
What was the Adam Sandler one he was in?
the awful
and
one, the
Jill.
one that shall not be named.
Yeah,
Jack and Jill.
Hey,
He
his
was
Doug
the best thing
Pacino
in
bit.
that movie, but he was the best thing in that movie, and that movie was awful.
And
Well, hey, it could have been the one with the cows, right, Brandon?
Dave, what were you saying?
how about Keith, played by Mandy Patinkin?
Oh yeah, he was good too.
Oh, Mandy Patinkin, yeah.
Yes, Betty Keys.
Yeah,
I
He-
forgot that was him because he didn't look like
Yeah.
himself, but he was great in that role.
yeah.
He was
The,
in a
actually-
movie where pretty much everybody is quite literally a cartoon character.
Yep.
He was acting as though he was in like a real gangster film, and if anything, it helped kind of ground the movie. And also interesting little parallels here because I'm thinking of the scene where he talks to the blank. The blank debuted in comics. In the comics in 1937, and predated by several decades. Predated The Question, predated Mr. A, and predated Rorschach.
Yep.
All very similar characters, very similar motifs.
Shadowy, faceless characters.
Yeah, with a trench coat and everything. Speaks in a creepy voice.
Or
but the blank was there first.
Or did you ever see Mario Bava's Blood and Black Lace?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you definitely see some influence there too. Plus, which is also a movie that also feels like a comic book. In that felt like a comic book to me.
One thing
the character of the blank, who, spoiler alert, is Breathless Mahoney, but like when she's in the blank outfit and doing the voice and everything, I was like, this could. If they were making this movie nowadays, they could have gone in like a Sin City type direction, and that character would have fit in there possibly even better.
I forget. Did anyone even mention Sin City for this theme? Because that would have been an excellent one.
I thought we did.
I originally had it as one of my suggestions, but then when I think when Dave changed Popeye to From Hell, I was like, no. I've got to have Popeye, so I had to kick it.
So one thing I do want to say real quick before we get away from the characters, and particularly Big Boy, one of my favorite things that he always did, I love the thing where he would always throw out random. He would say something and then attribute it to someone else, and they're not either he is clearly misconstruing the quote or they're just not even there. Like one of my favorites, I'm looking at one line, one particular. Right, the one I'm looking at here is, because I have a vision. The big boss must have a vision. We got a town with thousands of small stores and businesses. People are working real hard. I think they should be working real hard for us because we are for the people. And if you ain't for the people, you can't buy the people. Lincoln.
I know. I love that.
Paul Sorvino playing Lips Man.
Yes.
Manless. Okay. Well,
he was so fucking disgusting. I'm so glad that he didn't last very long in the story. Like he
Madonna had a good line. Do you mind if I leave? You make me sick when you eat.
Yeah.
The reason why I mentioned him is because he came up in our Repo the Genetic opera.
Yes.
So just a character.
Another fine character actor. He's been in a lot of stuff over the years, a lot of gangster films.
Same, and this film came out the same year as Goodfellas. So 1990 was quite the gangster movie year.
Yep.
Right.
All right. So, okay, where should we get? Okay, so I guess we should get the plot. I guess should we go do play by play for the whole movie, or?
I mean, what is there really to say? I mean, plot-wise, this is very simple.
Some of the scenes are worth noting. Like we mentioned, lips. Like basically, the film opens. The bath. Yeah, it basically opens with I wanted to say Capone, Caprice stealing the Club Ritz from his mentor. You get the impression was the manless kind of
Because actually, there was Disney published 2 prequel comics, set in within the movie's continuity, and in those prequel comics. Manless puts a hit out on Big Boy. So basically, he's taking over Lips's empire as retaliation for trying to kill him.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Which, by the way, the whole you had in this movie, you had the bath. That totally reminded me of the dip in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which was also a kind of murder mystery film that was set in 1947, so not the 30s, but still, there are a lot of similarities there too.
I don't know if it would be an appropriate title, but I feel like movies like this, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and Sin City, they're kind of like what I would call like a very stylized, like a fantasy noir.
Yeah, basically. And I do think that the comparisons to Who Framed Roger Rabbit are warranted because they were, murder mystery kind of noir influence films, period pieces, visual marvels, special effects spectaculars, both put out by Touchstone, so it's like you can't really not make the comparison.
And Roger Rabbit was what, maybe 2 years old when this came out? 2 or 3 years old.
Only 2 years old.
So it was fresh in people's minds.
Actually, when this movie came out, it was accompanied by a Roger Rabbit short.
Right.
That's right. Which, and I think in a lot of ways, so kind of in the
kids on VHS. It had, Roger Rabbit and that Boss Baby.
I just realized that my DVD does not have that short, and Touchstone Pictures failed.
Yeah. The interesting thing, I think, so in much the same way that Who Framed Roger Rabbit is kind of a watershed movie in terms of animation and live action together, I think you could argue that this movie is a watershed in terms of a couple different areas, one of which was the matte paintings, but also how they merged with the set design and especially the makeup. This movie won Best Makeup for a good reason, because no other movie looks like this in all kinds of areas, but especially the makeup. The villains in the comic strip were deliberately cartoonishly grotesque to be caricatures of the real life grotesquerie of mobsters, and so that was part of the design, was to just show these people for the monsters that they were and just put them up there on the page, or in this case on the screen, in all their grotesquerie. And the makeup blending still looks pretty damn good to me. My favorite out of all of them is the one that's only on screen for a few minutes, is the one that Dick Tracy goes to chase the kid into that cabin. Like that guy, like he looked like a monster. And remember, they had the fist fight in the little shack there. It just gets destroyed. But like that whole creature, like he looked horrifying. And I mean that in a great way. I mean, the makeup artist did a fantastic job. But I think the way that they made those people look was so utterly unique, and nobody's really tried to replicate it. And I mean that in the best possible way, because I want this movie to be as special as it is in that department.
And this ties back to the question that we mentioned in the other one on fidelity to comics. From what I understand, the look of Big Boy was actually one that Al Pacino came up with.
Yeah.
Or that's the story. But most of the others were apparently very much like their comic book counterparts.
Yeah.
Like they were very much similar. Dick Tracy himself was a little different too, because they didn't want to bury Warren Beatty under makeup.
Which was
but all the villains,
it made him stand out more with the it made him
the fact that the heroes look normal and the villains look monstrous, I think that serves the story, but they also got lucky with the casting of Warren Beatty because well, he had been cast for a little while before he eventually decided to take over as director and producer, because eventually he realized, just be easier for me to do this, and not have to go around somebody else, which, I can understand. But like they got lucky with the casting there because he already had a very kind of square jaw, classical hero kind of look to him. So it's like, then most people don't necessarily look like that. And so therefore, it served the character well. And even Madonna at that particular stage in her career, she was it was the Blonde Ambition tour, the very famous Blonde Ambition tour. And she actually used clips from the movie and songs from the movie in the tour, which is another good way to promote it. But then she was definitely going through that kind of Marilyn Monroe 2.0 phase of her look visually. But it also did manage to work in that 30s blonde bombshell period as well, because obviously Marilyn Monroe was 50s and 60s.
Dave, you're saying something?
He said "Some Like It Hot."
Some Like It Hot.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Set in 1927, but set 1929, but made in 1959. But that I thought even that whole look for her worked very well, and she was definitely hottest thing on the planet at that time, and accentuated that in all kinds of ways. And she and Warren Beatty were together for a brief period of time, kind of during and immediately following this. But it was not to be. But apparently they've spoken very fondly of each other, which is more than can be said for the admittedly horrific time she had gone through with Sean Penn the few years before that.
All right. And okay, so boy, I kind of got
yeah, we're kind of all over the place, but I mean the basic thrust of the thing is a lot of attempts by Dick Tracy to capture or to bring about Big Boy Caprice's end, and he kind of narrowly slips through his fingers through some technicality or through Dick Tracy not having enough evidence and being way too gung-ho about trying to get his
DA being in Big Boy's pocket.
Honestly, I was kind of on Big Boy's side, at least in the beginning stages, because I do think Dick Tracy was a bit too gung-ho to try to get him on very scant evidence. And it was like, build your case, buddy. Don't just go in there guns a-blazing. And of course, eventually he does have enough to nail him. But it's like, that's police work is not about how many doors can you kick down and how many guys can you arrest on scant evidence. And I mean, Dick Van Dyke's district attorney character rightfully puts him in his place, although of course we find out that he's later in Big Boy Caprice's pocket. But I'm kind of on their side in that beginning part, because I'm like, you're shooting from the hip in a way that you shouldn't. You should build your case against this guy.
Although it does bring up an interesting pair of sequences involving Dustin Hoffman's character Mumbles, where you bring him in and they're giving him that like almost like water, like sweat under the lights, denying him water, and then he comes back and reveals that, wait a minute, there was a recording device in this water cooler. But then he starts playing and Mumbles just starts cracking up, and then he starts slowing it down until you can hear exactly what Mumbles said. And I think Hoffman played that role very, very well. He did a great job with his limited time.
I know. I've often said that a good actor can speak total gibberish and make you believe it. This is
Mhm.
quite literally that.
Yeah. Well, okay, so
Dave,
SAG,
okay.
they pay. So like per SAG stipulations or something, they pay the actors by the line. So I'm kind of wondering, like with Dustin Hoffman slurring all his words, did he like get anything for?
Well, he did this as a favor to Beatty. So I know some of the actors, like Madonna, worked for scale. I think a few of them did it just as favors. Like, it's one of those things where some people are just like, oh, well, why not?
Yeah. Which I mean,
Yeah.
and Madonna, like you said, yeah, she worked for scale because there was she didn't want to be accused of nepotism, which is
Right.
very wise of her. But she did not at all come out poorly from this, far from it,
no.
because
She got
again,
an album from it.
the album, the
Yeah.
Blonde Ambition tour. I mean,
Right.
this thing paid off for her handsomely, just in a different way. And again, I this is the only movie I know of, like singular movie, that had 3 soundtracks associated with it. I have never heard of that happening. This is a music heavy movie, but I'm glad for it.
Right. The although it because there was so much music and because Disney was involved, I'd have to go back and try to dig up what was actually submitted for original song that year. But given Disney's usual practices, it wouldn't surprise me if sooner or later was the only one even submitted, because Disney does that. They want to make sure they're going to win for the song they think they can win for.
Yeah.
And it's just like More was a wonderful song. Back in Business, that whole sequence, the whole montage set to Back in Business is one of my favorite parts in the movie. That whole montage was just so great. And part of that was the music, but it was just
the montage is in the middle. The montage is in the middle, especially the Sooner or Later montage. Like that's practically like a movie trailer and a music video kind of all rolled into one. Like you could totally take that and you would instantly have a trailer, or you'd instantly have a music video. It's kind of amazing. But the interesting thing about it, on a soundtrack level, for the Madonna "I'm Breathless" album, that was actually the album that Vogue appeared on. Which is pretty cool.
So, Dave, you were saying, did anyone expect, what was it that you were going?
I was going to say, did anyone expect that reveal of Madonna being the no-name?
I don't believe I did. I think I was
surprised. I didn't.
When I was like 4, not when I was 3 years old.
Because that is it's not just the big boy faction in here. There's this whole other backline story of the blank. Going around and playing the both sides, and you're not really sure which side
they're on.
They're on. Right. And then all of a sudden, bang, boom, bada! It's the end in that clock tower in the bridge. And suddenly reveal. Oh, it's like, what the hell?
Yeah, I like that twist a lot. I think it was pretty effective.
I agree.
Particularly because the blank is such a mysterious character for most of the movie that, again, it's like that character, if you were to, because I watched the movie and I was like, you could totally do like a really dark, super violent version of Dick Tracy if you wanted. Like you could do like a Sin City version of this. And if you were to do that, the blank would fit in just as well, if not better. In that version of it, but the character worked remarkably well, and the blank is so mysterious, but then you put it together and you're like, yeah, that makes sense, because Breathless is trying to escape the being a gangster's mole, but also is trying to be on top in a way that she wouldn't otherwise get to be. And I think that gave her character a lot of sophistication that she doesn't have when she's just herself, because she is just a cheap floozy, or at least that's how people see her. So she reveals herself to be a lot more cunning than that.
And actually, the things that she does, first of all, she takes down Tracy by framing him for the district attorney's murder.
Yeah.
And that leads to that whole back in business thing. But then she turns the tables on Caprice.
Big boy.
And I love that line where it's like, I framed you for the one crime you didn't commit.
Yeah, I love that. Which the funny part about all of that, I think, is that how did they finally nail the real Al Capone? It was
Tax
with
evasion.
tax evasion.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So, it's one of those things that there's a real life precedent there.
Right. And then that whole thing in the clock tower, you did have some pretty iconic stuff there. Of course, my favorite part, he freaks out. He runs there with Tess because he's like, I can't let them catch me with you're a hostage. And it's like,
it was like this woman, even though he's got her kidnapped.
What was it he said? It was something like, well, I didn't kidnap you, but I'm kidnapping you now.
Yeah.
But he had my favorite line in the whole movie is where he's like, he gets this eureka moment. Wait a minute. Wait. I'm having a thought. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I'm going to have a thought. It's coming. It's gone.
I love that. Love that. So, now, I will say, I do think some of the editing in the third act is a little jarring, especially like the cutaways between the musical number of more and more and more there with Madonna, and some of the cutaways between like that and the kind of the shootout, and then also some of the cutaways between Big Boy and Tess having some banter, and Dick Tracy chasing after him. Some of the way that cuts together is a little clunky. And then there's like three different styles of editing. There's a more conventional style in the first act. There's more montages and more kind of music video-esque segments in the middle act. And then the third act, it gets a little choppier, I find. But so that's plus the kind of episodic nature of the plot. I would kind of ding them a few points on that because there's not a strong enough through line. You do get some of that inconsistency with pacing. But I do think, again, in some of those last moments, like the one you mentioned, like that was a particularly amusing moment from Big Boy.
What about other characters that we hadn't discussed, like the kid, for instance? We mentioned him for like 5 seconds. But I thought that it was an interesting character type. Coming in there, going from just this urchin who's even trying to just take money. I like the interaction that he has in the diner where he's taking the money and she's like, nah, it does that. But also
you want
how
a broken arm?
Becomes, exactly. And how eventually he goes from this kid, he doesn't want to wear a suit, nothing there, but then eventually he gets to that point where he is kind of idolizing Dick Tracy. And
when do we eat? Dick Tracy Jr.
Yeah, when do we eat? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was really funny. And I have to give them credit, which again, they were modeling this movie so much after Tim Burton's Batman, but this movie succeeds where so far every live action Batman film has so far failed, even Batman Forever and Batman Robin. Yeah, because with Batman Forever, he's already like a young adult, and it's like that doesn't really work. But like this is an actual kid, a street kid, who is the sidekick of the main character, that is the sidekick of the main character in the comics, if I remember correctly.
Yes, he is.
But he's an actual like street kid, an urchin. He's following him around. He's a kid. He's full of gumption and everything. Surprisingly not annoying like you would think he would be.
I like him in his suit.
He's the correct age, similar to like what Robin would be. He's the correct age, but he's not annoying. His origin is pretty believable. And they even poke holes in some of the things that people would poke holes in with Dick Grayson, which is the fact that, he's like, you can't just be around the station. You got to be reported to the, child welfare office, It's like, yeah, that would kind of undo the whole Dick Grayson argument there.
Well, granted,
you can't.
Tracy's a lawman. Is a lawman. He's a cop. He's got to do what's.
Yeah.
And you also can't overlook the fact of Bruce Wayne's superpower, which is he is filthy rich. He can do what he wants.
Yeah, he can just adopt street kids for his own nefarious and totally not pedophilic purposes.
Right.
That rich line was one of my favorite lines from, I can't remember which one it was. I think it was Justice League.
Yeah, Joss Whedon's Justice League.
I still like that line. It's a great movie.
I did like that line too. I have to admit.
Right. And then another good big boy moment in this one was when he has that meltdown tantrum, where the one where he flips the table.
Oh yeah.
That's enough. I want them dead, both of them.
Both of them.
No face character dead, and I want.
He calls her No Face.
Yeah. He's like, what's the matter? You bums forgot how to kill people? Doesn't your work mean anything to you anymore? Have you no sense of pride in what you do? No sense of duty? No sense of destiny? I'm looking for generals. What do I got?
Foot soldiers.
I want Dick Tracy dead now.
I love it. That was total hamming it up like mad. But
again, no one can ham quite like Al Pacino. So
nah, and again, intentionally so, and I think very effectively.
Right.
Because again, he is a deliberate cartoon version of a gangster, and I think he plays that very well.
And actually, this is another interesting and probably unintentional parallel between this one and Road to Perdition. Both movies had the supporting actor playing the mob boss as the only acting nomination for the film.
Yeah.
And that's a weird little parallel.
And two legends from around the same decade of prominence.
Right. Hollywood. And then another interesting bit on the Oscar history here is that this film, until Black Panther, was the only comic movie to win 3 Oscars, and now Black Panther is tied it. And that's kind of a sad statistic. It really is. But
that is changing, though. I mean, especially with like Joker and all these other ones that have really they've really raised their game, and they've really gotten the Academy's attention.
Joker ended up winning 2 awards, or was it?
I believe it was 2. I'm thinking more so, and I'm thinking more so in terms of like getting nominations and even getting noticed. But again, the strides that Black Panther and Joker have made, it's like Dick Tracy was the ultimate outlier for such a long time, and then it was The Dark Knight getting a lot of nominations, but then there was another gap, and then finally you had some other ones that were.
And there was a huge outcry about how many missed opportunities they had with Dark Knight. Best Picture.
Yeah. But that's again, I think it's wonderful that we have to give it up for movies like Dick Tracy, which it's not a perfect movie, and in some ways it's kind of imperfect by design insofar as like it's deliberately two-dimensional in its characterizations and everything, but we have to give it up for the essential groundwork that they laid, so that way you can have movies like Black Panther and Joker to reach such high heights that they couldn't have achieved otherwise.
Right. And I don't think we've done it yet, so I've got to give a shout out to Charles Durning. I don't think we've mentioned him yet.
Chief Brandon.
This Chief Brandon,
One of
Charles
the most
Durning is always awesome
of all time.
Yeah.
Or even Seymour Cassell as Sam Ketchum.
Yeah.
And Dick Van Dyke as the Dick Attorney.
Yeah.
Which again, it's Dick Van Dyke's in the movie. You think that's enough dicks?
We didn't talk about her that much. What about Glenn Headley? What about the late Glenn Headley? Tess?
Yeah. She, I had not really realized before, but when I was watching it this time, Tess has a little bit of a fight back to her. Like you guys mentioned the part where the kid tried to take the tip and she's like, "You want a broken arm?" And it was like, but there was a couple moments like that, and she's kind of a fun character in her way.
Yeah, I think more probably could have been done with her, and I think that if
Right.
they'd have had a more charismatic actress in that role, I think she could have stood out a little bit more. But then again, she does sufficiently contrast with Breathless, because with it being Madonna, she's automatically going to be such a physical.
Plain Jane.
Well, Madonna is going to be a physical standout, number one, but also just character-wise, she's going to be a real standout because the femme fatale always is in these kinds of stories. So you do have to have like the good girl or whatever to contrast. Yeah. I do think they probably could have had a more charismatic actress in that role, but even within the good girl constraints. But I think that there is sufficient contrast, and there is more to her character than I observed the first time, especially with her interactions with the kid. And the way that apparently in the comics it was kind of similar to like Clark Kent and Lois Lane in the sense that they kind of tease their furthering of their romance for decades before they finally did get together. You get a lot of missed opportunities for Dick Tracy to like finally confess his feelings for her, and then he eventually has to kind of toss her the ring while he's off to do another case. So apparently that spirit is true to the comics, plus the fact that in those kinds of serialized narratives from that era, the idea was kind of that the pulp hero, ultimately his duty was to his job, and that that these kinds of cat and mouse games would go on forever. And you often do get that criticism lodged at certain superheroes and stuff, which that was actually one of my favorite parts of.
One day we'll get that White House with the picket fence.
Well, I like in this one where he kept trying to bring it up. He kept going, "Well, you like living alone, and I like living alone, and since we have so much in common, I thought we should do something about it." It's kind of a weird lead in there. But I think Forrest was the one that just mentioned something that I had forgotten Glenn Headley had passed away, and that was kind of sad. But apparently, one of her last movies, and certainly her last one I saw, was a movie starring Tom Hanks, The Circle. So that was kind of an interesting tie-in as well to our previous one tonight. The Circle was a movie that was disappointing, but still pretty good. But
I have it in my collection. I just haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, I had meant to read it. I was told it was not as good as the book, but it's still good. You get to see Hanks in another villain role after a fashion. But can't remember what Headley played in the film. But anyway, I thought overall she is a little plainer than Madonna, but I don't think she's bad for the role. And again, there is that contrast, and that's probably a good thing. You get the you wouldn't want them both to be traditionally gorgeous characters. You know what I mean?
If you were to cast that role nowadays, a good choice for that kind of part, I think, would have been Jenna Fisher from The Office, who played Pam. I think she actually would have been a really good pick for that.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Especially if they did, honestly, if they were to redo it now, I would probably see John Krasinski being on the short list for Dick Tracy.
That would be pretty cool, actually. And I'm serious, that would be pretty sweet. And I would still love to see possibly in formal comic book form. I would love to see a for mature readers version of Dick Tracy. I think that would be pretty cool.
I mean, the comic book was already pretty controversial for its time, just for the level of for its depiction of how violent it was.
That's right. Which I mean, that's something to touch on is the fact that in 1931 in the newspapers, newspaper strips were much like early comic books later on. They were very much kind of the Wild West of the medium. So there was no, the newspapers could print kind of whatever they wanted, and then that was long before in the comic book medium. That was long before the Comics Code Authority. It was very much a Wild West time, and the Dick Tracy comics were very violent for their time. The 30s was a very violent decade in general, in real life, and also on the big screen and in the newspapers and comic strips. That would keep in mind that was the decade of Batman being introduced, but also Batman in his earliest appearances used a gun and killed criminals.
Yep.
So, I mean, the 30s was a decade where nobody had any illusions about life. They knew that life was hard and that death was imminent and all that kind of stuff. So Dick Tracy was very much that kind of character. So I mean, you could totally do that sort of thing today in a mature comic book. It would be cool to do that and also set it in the period. That'd be even cooler. But it's I think it's safe to say with what all we've said today that our dear Richard Tracy is more than what the AVGN said, which is stupid banana raincoat wearing dick.
Well, he does have that banana raincoat on, which Dave was trying to compare him to Batman earlier. I don't know what kind of
imitative of the man in the yellow hat in Curious George.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So,
that would be a movie. You give the man in the yellow hat a fucking machine gun.
Yes,
Curious George, the savage little monkey.
Yes, and Curious George is actually his trained assassin.
Yeah.
But I gotta tell you though, David, you amused me because, especially in light of our conversations last night regarding stealth, the whole idea of Batman wearing bright banana yellow.
You have to wait for the Silver Age for Batman to have the really bright rainbow colors, not the Golden Age.
Well, I do believe at one point Flash was wearing that color outfit, but
Well, if you want to think about the old Batman serials, he was in black and white. So, technically, he did start out in silver.
But in the 50s and 60s, that's when you got like Batman wearing all pink and it. So
he wore an exercise leotard for a costume. So
you had to wait till the wackier decades for that to happen, though.
Not much different than the Mouser size videos that I remember as a child.
Right.
But in any case, did we want to get to our favorite scenes? I mean, I know we talked about production throughout the whole thing.
I think everything has been talked about, pretty much the music, the production, everything.
The makeup.
Yeah.
Right.
It's pretty much
solid.
We were all over the place on this one.
Right. I do think I can't remember when it really hit me like a ton of bricks that the film looked like a comic book. I don't think I thought that the first few times I saw it, but I think it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I saw it and I was like, man, the production design in this is just, you don't think about these things when you're a kid, but then when you go and look at it, you're like, they did a really good job of doing a live action old school comic. And, that's really what they wanted. So
I'm really trying to think of favorite scenes because, I mean, this movie to me is more so about you get to be in this world for 2 hours or whatever. And,
it's a hangout film.
A little bit. I mean, it is not the most plot intensive movie. There's a lot of stuff that kind of repeats.
Yes.
But again, I do think that part of it is trying to capture that serialized narrative feature of what Dick Tracy is. I'm really trying to think if I have a favorite scene. I mean, I think well, what's leaping to mind right now is all the scenes where Breathless tries to unsuccessfully to seduce our dear Dick, and she may be seducing one of the dicks, but the dick that matters, the one in his head, does not succumb to her charms. And
what does a girl have to do to get arrested around here?
Yeah,
well, wearing that dress is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, well, I remember those kind of stick out right this
no
moment.
grief for lips. I'm wearing black underwear. You know it's legal for me to take you down to the station and sweat it out of you under the lights. I sweat a lot better in the dark.
Yeah, for whatever reason, those scenes are jumping out at me. I think mostly it's because, like, you know, if Disney tried to do this today, they'd never do it that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, outside of that, I do think the ending shootout's pretty spectacular.
Aren't you gonna frisk me?
Yeah, I like her when she's on the desk too. It's like, you know, gee whiz, is that a, you know, they don't call you Dick Tracy for nothing.
My favorite.
And what about you, Dave? What was your favorite scene or any favorites?
I would have to say that one of my favorite scenes would probably be well, I do like the sexual situations with Dick Tracy. Those are kind of classic,
amusing,
I guess, and amusing per se, because they are really sexual in nature if you think about them. And
you don't have to think too hard. They make it pretty clear.
But I think one of my big boy moments was when he was trying to teach the dancers how to dance, and they weren't really dancing to his expectation. And for some reason, the fact that he was just kept getting madder and madder at them, that they weren't just getting it right.
I think every dancer that's ever danced on Broadway or whatever and had to deal with some diva choreographer or whatever could probably relate to that.
He did even something that I think Robin Williams imitated later on, where he was like Fosse.
Yeah.
Actually, funny thing is all those dancers, they were actually professional dancers, and they had to learn how to dance badly for that scene.
Yeah,
right.
But I mean, I'm sure that every dancer on Broadway has probably had to deal with someone like that.
Right.
Someone who's more than likely a lot gayer than that, but you know, not necessarily.
Right.
All right. And what about you, Brett? What about you, Jake? Favorites?
I mean, again, there's so many little bits in this one. I've seen it so many times over the years, and I think when I do, usually certain times I'll see one part is my favorite, and other times another part is. But I think if I had to say like what I always come back to, I can think of two. One is the moment where he's talking about having a thought. I just always love that. It's like the big villain who's talking about what a brain of the outfit he is talking. It was just a great moment. And actually, before I do the second one, I'm going to mention that we kind of touched on the board meeting of the villains, if you will. Yes. But I don't think we talked about how that ended, where James Caan's character gets killed in the car bomb. Spaldoni. So that was actually a fun little Godfather reunion there between the Corleone brothers that did not go well. Although Sonny Corleone did not have a good...
very, very reminiscent of the same kind of scene in Tim Burton's Batman, you know, with the Antoine got a little hot under the collar.
Exactly, yeah. and they may have even cribbed it from that. I don't know, but it is interesting how they took the fate of Michael Corleone's first wife and gave it to his brother in this particular rendition, which is kind of fun. But the other one I'm going to mention, the Back in Business, that montage, I love that sequence. And every time I see this movie, I for days afterwards,
I almost
sooner or later. It's often sooner or later that's stuck in my head, but it's usually Back in Business or More. Like those two songs are stuck in my head for days on end.
I have to also give a shout out for sure to the visuals of the sooner or later montage in the middle, just because again, like the visuals in that are so strong, and how they're used intercut with the song is so strong that totally could be like instant ready-made music video or trailer, right there in the middle.
I was going to say, I wonder if Inspector Gadget is somewhat based on the Dick Tracy character.
It could be.
Because
to some degree.
Especially because when I went back to rewatch that show after several years, I realized, holy crap, Inspector Gadget is a dick. He really is.
There's a great clip of someone on one of those game shows. I forget what it is, but it was describe a nickname for policeman, and the contestant, this is correct, but I think it was actually what's the one where survey says, is that
yeah,
that's what I thought it was. It was an older iteration of Family Feud. The contestant correctly, although obscurely, says "dick" in like a really demonstrative way, where he like slams his fist down on the podium, and he doesn't. Nobody else answered that, but I mean, he's technically correct, but it's just the way he says it. The nickname for policeman, "dick."
Well. That's why when you ever think of a private eye, sometimes they're called a private dick detective, or a police dick detective, or something of that nature. I mean, they've been called dicks for almost their entire life.
Breathless Mahoney was trying to make a private dick public, if you know what I mean.
Let me get to my favorite scene here before y'all get too off the rails.
Sit down the dick hole.
So, I really did find it still fascinates me, that first scene with the meeting of all the bosses. Of course, they all die off not long after, which was both a shocking scene for me when I watched this as a child, but also I thought it was one of the most fun scenes for me because I got to see all the various makeup works done up. You got to see all the ones like this. I don't know why, but Screwhead was always my favorite one.
You mean Flat Top?
No, there was that one that had like a screw head, like an actual screw. You could see it like as a head. They even did the face shaping for it, which was pretty cool.
You mean the brow? The brow.
No, one of the others. I think I know who you're talking about because I saw a picture of them earlier.
Yeah, it's been a while, so it's my memory is a little bit out at this point, but that was my favorite as a child, and but he was also one of the most deformed ones, so I'm sure that it was probably one that they didn't want to try and utilize for the entire film. But still, it was just kind of fun to see it that way and move forward. So I just like that scene. I still do. It's still my favorite in the film.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of hard. There's like so much to, for me, like as an adult, for me, there's still like 30 years later, there's still so much for me to like about this movie. It's hard to really narrow it down. But Al Pacino as Big Boy. Like the more I watch it, Al Pacino as Big Boy stands more and more out to me. Stands out more and more to me. because he's just having so much. He's just having so much fun. Like he's like if I were to pull like the big four of like great scene chewing villains, he would be up there with Jack Nicholson's Joker, Dustin Hoffman's Captain Hook, and Alan Rickman's Sheriff of Nottingham.
All very well portrayed in their own right.
It's surprising that Charlie Corsmo doesn't have any more real acting credits after pretty much Hook. I mean,
well, like I said, he pretty much left
Charmed for Life. Yeah, he left acting for quite some time. I mean, the last movie he was in was Chained for Life, which I'm not.
Can't Hardly Wait was his last one.
I quite enjoyed Can't Hardly Wait.
That was a really good one.
Yeah.
I just saw that for the first time a few months ago.
So I wanted to say, Brandon, the IMDb says Stooge Shoulders, The Rodent, The Brow, and Littleface are the ones that were in that scene.
I went down at the beginning.
I'm not sure, but one thing I wanted to say about that scene that's really cool, and I wanted to find the exact information because I don't remember it precisely, but the hand that one of them calls right before they are all executed is the hand that's known in poker as the dead man's hand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I just thought that was interesting. Yeah.
Well, I know that because in my own film noir short film that I made, I used the dead man's hand.
So that's a fun little touch.
I actually visited Deadwood at one point in time, the exact bar in which Wild Bill Hickok actually ended up being in that.
Good times.
So that was kind of cool. But in any case, did we want to go around and do our outros?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
Why not?
Okay.
All right, Forrest, why don't you go ahead first, and then tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
All right, so I'm Forrest Bennett. I'm based in Long Island, New York. So in addition to being a big Dick Tracy and comic book enthusiast, I'm also a producer of an independent film producer. Actually, one movie I produced. A movie I produced called Strix, written and directed by Abel Berry, just premiered the other day.
Very good.
Very cool. And I actually saw a company name for you recently on your profile, correct?
A company profile?
Well, I thought that you were co-producer on a company of some sort.
I have an indie film studio that I'm currently trying to get off the ground.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was.
But although that's still a work in progress. That's still a work in progress. Another movie that I produced recently. Another movie I produced a while back. Camp Murder came out on Blu-ray last week.
Oh yes, I remember that. Oh.
Awesome. So going over to Dane, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I'm Dane Kyle. I'm also a big Dick Tracy fan, and tried to figure out how many dick jokes I could squeeze into this thing. Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, you just couldn't find the right buns.
Nah, couldn't. Tried to screw as many as I could into this little, space of time. But yeah,
think how much fun you would have had if he was an undercover cop.
Oh, the sequel, Dick Undercover, which they did try for years to make a sequel to this thing, but they got bogged down in so many rights issues.
Right.
And apparently Warren Beatty does still own the rights to another feature film adaptation and has been trying in some form or fashion to get another one going, although I don't know how in the hell you do that these days. I don't know people really care about Dick Tracy anymore.
He's a lot more. He's been a niche character. He's always been a very niche character, or at least since the 50s, he's been a niche character.
Yeah.
50s, he's been a niche character.
Although
Yeah.
I'd love to see what they could bring about in this day and age if they would be able to bring the Dick Tracy story to the modern filmography. It would be interesting where they would take it.
I mean, Robert Rodriguez made Sin City work in that, which again, it's not 100% the same thing, but it's like he made that into its own kind of cinematic / technological landmark. But anyway, yeah, so I'm Dane Kyle, also a big Dick Tracy fan, and and comic books in general. And I have 2 channels, Indie Horror Film Creative and No Money Film School. I have been under a lot of stress lately, but I think that stress is about to come to an end for all kinds of good reasons before too long. And so I'll be able to get back onto regular schedules I was doing film commentaries on No Money Film School for a while. Want to get back into doing that. I've been busy trying to get some short films going, and I actually did some location scouting last weekend for the film that I'm trying to get going. It's just, pandemic permitting, but yeah, so that's what all I'm up to.
Alrighty. Going over to Brandon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Septum Sen, a Septum Sen versus the world. We like physical media here. We've been kind of in a almost in a dormancy stage, doing our typical updates, but I guess pandemic being what it is, it's hard to get a lot of other things going. But we do usually try to keep up with the pickup, usually new movie releases. And we usually do a vlogcast every week on Mondays. This time around, we thought we would introduce the world to the superhero game Spandex Heroes. So we had a fun game night. And if y'all have an interest in that system out there while watching, you can always ask, and I can always send a copy of that. But it was a fun night. I think we all enjoyed it. And of course, next week we are going. Jake and I are going to go on and talk about our predictions for nominees for the Academy Awards. Somewhat that again. But I also do work for Inside Movies Galore, helping to organize what comes up on our lists. Of course, our non-superhero comic book month is Western version is hitting its next week, where we're going to be covering a almost American manga ish, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and a slightly darker comic book adaptation from Hell. So a lot of fun to be had next week.
Good times.
All right, Jake, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
All right, I am Jake. I am the co-host of Septum Sin versus the World, and we had some fun this week. Our pickup video was heavy on birthday pickups, and it was a nice haul, and that's always fun. And it was kind of fun, doing a little Spandex Heroes after all this time. One of my favorite characters I ever played was in a Spandex game, but I wanted to mix it up and do something different. So, but I originally played an electricity user who was tricked into electrocuting herself because there was an imposter in the mirror. We were talking about wisdom.
The wisdom of Dick Tracy.
But and I certainly am looking forward to the rest of this month. I am a big comic fan myself. I am looking forward to seeing a lot of these and it should be a lot of fun. It should be good times. I hope y'all had fun tonight. I think I did, and that's all I'm going to go on about tonight.
Okay. And my name is David Striggy. I am one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with us on these first two films going into the non-comic book book based on comic book adaptations that have to do with the Western world. Did I get that right?
Non-superhero Western comic adaptations.
See, I still haven't gotten that tongue twister down.
It's the artist formerly known as Prince. Get it right.
Yeah.
or for tonight though, we could say tonight's theme was comics, crimes, and capers.
Yeah.
And Collins.
Now that would have been an interesting film where Dick Tracy was played by Prince.
Oh wow! I think that was Under the Cherry Moon, wasn't it? But I think
Maxwell and Collins, both.
I think that the moral of the story for tonight, folks, is don't be a dick, Tracy, because there's only one.
There can only be one.
That's right.
I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur. So definitely come onto my channel, see what video pickups I have in store for you, as well as video reviews. I swear to you, I'm not that bad. So stay tuned.
You're just drawn that way.
As I comically laugh. Anyways. As we get colorful, ladies and gentlemen, we say good night to you. And have a good morning, evening, or day wherever you are. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Are fans of Dick Tracy, can they be called dickheads? Kind of like how Grateful Dead fans are deadheads.